Thank you. Self-sovereign identity will change the way the travel industry interacts with its passengers and guests. It will also change the way you interact with everything, online and in the real world. So just a fast question, how many people here are familiar with self-sovereign identity, digital IDs, or verified credentials? Got a couple, okay, well that's good. We're gonna start with a couple slides. I know we aren't supposed to do those on roundtables, but we got special dispensation to do it. So we'll use a bar example. Everybody can relate to a bar example. What you'd have is, say, an issuer. An issuer is a Department of Motor Vehicles, right? You got a driver's license, and that credential is given to a holder, which could be my daughter, right? Which is fine. She puts it in her wallet, and that's fine, she's carrying it around. Now she wants to go to a bar, what does she do? She has to show that to a bartender or a bouncer, a stranger, and what kind of information is on that? It's got her name, it's got her date of birth, it's got her eye color, her address, all sorts of information which is completely irrelevant to the bar. All they need to know is, are you over 21? That's the question. So from a privacy perspective, that sucks. From the bar perspective, it's not that good. The other thing is that the verifier, who's the bar or the bouncer, they've got to trust her. And not saying my daughter, when she was at Texas Tech, used her big sister and her sorority's friend's driver's license. It wasn't a fake, it was a real one, but it wasn't her, right? So they've got to trust her that they're doing it. This is a bad, bad situation, but that's the way things have always been. So next slide, slightly improved, and our experts here who are involved in this will be able to vouch for it. One other thing to say is, what we're talking about, this is W3C, the verified credentials. You know, it's W3C spec, just like HTML, just like XML, CSS, all those things that deal with your online life, which are essential for the web to work, but this one also crosses into the real world. So in this case, you have an issuer, and again, the issuer could be a Department of Motor Vehicles, could be anything. It could be a hotel, it could be an airline with a ticket, whoever's issuing a particular credential. They give it to the holder, but let's stick with the bar example. Department of Motor Vehicles gives the holder their digital certificate, and at the same time, they take their decentralized ID and file it on the blockchain. No, it's not the crypto stuff, it's the blockchain, and that's a whole separate session, but that's fine. You've got a public key and some other cryptographic metadata in there. The holder puts it in their wallet, which probably looks a lot like this or something, and that's fine. Now when they give it to a bar and present that proof, all they have is their credential, which has their key on it, and for a bar, all that has to say is, yeah, they're over 21. And the bar reads the credential from the public key and goes, yeah, this stuff matches up, that's a valid credential, we're good, you're in. A much, much smoother and streamlined process. And the cool part is, because of these keys, if the internet's, you don't need online internet access at that point, you can just have the keys and go, yeah, this works. So it's a very cool thing. So thought what we would do, as opposed to talk about this is some future thing and way out there, these guys are on the front lines, they're doing it now, right? The real use cases of what's happening. So just to start off, so what makes this so special? What's so cool about SSI and DIDs?
The fact is, we live in a world of untrustworthy data. Most of the data that we receive is either self-attested, or it's replications, photographs, JPEGs, uploads, username, passwords. What SSI does is it actually allows verifiers to trust the data that they receive based on the issuer, but more importantly, it introduces dignity into our digital lives. Because we live in a world where we like to say, oh, our physical world and our digital world are separate. Not so much. There's nothing I can do very much in the physical world without the digital world. But yet, the digital world feels it has more authority over my data than I do. And so what SSI does is it introduces trust It introduces verified source data, and it brings the dignity back to the holder to allow what they want to disclose given the context of that relationship.
So all of a sudden, the individual traveler or that individual decides who's getting their information for what purposes, for how long, which is a big paradigm shift. So Kaliya might be interesting. She's been working on the COVID credentials initiative with the Linux Health Foundation. So.
Yeah. So I think to build on what Heather said, I think the other thing about verifiable credentials as a standard is that it has very broad expressive capacity. It was designed to support any entity saying something about another entity. So anytime that happens in all of these wonderful transactions I've learned so much about here at your in travel, that could be expressed using a verifiable credential and putting that information in the hands of the individual and them choosing when to share it and how, and them being the pivot point of data sharing. So there was several talks at this conference where folks were like, join our data club and share all the data about the people. And we're like, ugh. Part of the reason you need to do that is because we don't have these better systems that go over the top that support individuals sharing that data when they want to, and potentially a lot of information. And you know it's both coming from them as the individual, but it's signed, cryptographically signed by whoever they're doing business with. Mm-hmm. Right? So you can have higher confidence in it. It's not just self-attested.
Oh, that's great. I think a great example, Filipe's with IATA, and IATA, certainly has gotten a lot of press regarding travel pass, and certainly the COVID pandemic has accelerated a lot across so many different industries, but it's certainly jumped things forward because you have challenges. You want to make sure people are vaccinated when they're getting on airlines and crossing borders. So you can describe a little bit about what travel pass is doing. And
the idea was exactly that, is trying to create something which is an app, a very simple app that's based on all the standards, the best standards in the industry, to facilitate people traveling. So what we want to do, as the ladies here said, is that people will be able to share the information with whoever they need to share and at the date and the quality they need to share, so that the next element in the travel chain can make the decision about, okay, do you meet the requirements or don't? So in today's world, and again, many of you, I suppose, might have traveled here from abroad, so there might be a requirement for antigen test or PCR test. Does this test meet the requirement of currently the US government, or does it not? And how to verify that it is a true test, is an integrated, is an integer information that can be trusted, and therefore the passenger can be allowed to cross borders. So the app is designed to facilitate all of that, and as well, the passengers being able to upload their electronic travel documentation, which again ties one with the other, and gives another level of certainty about the quality and the trustability of the information.
So the interesting thing is the technology is, it's still relatively new in terms of global deployment, but the technology is kind of, what are some of the issues that you're running, or challenges you may be running into with the world adopting these things, or their current practices colliding with the future?
I think one of the many challenges is exactly the rollout of the standard and making sure that there is something that people can rely and can agree. So having governments accept and make the change, philosophically speaking, and saying, all right, I will not only work based on paper, but I will accept something electronic, which I'll be able to validate. Sometimes governments, most of the governments, they're very conservative. So to them, paper is still the mean of compliance. When what we're trying to do is get them to understand that there's something much better, which is way better in terms of trust and quality, and this should be the future paradigm. So that paradigm shift, it's going to take a while, but it will happen.
So the little US cardboardy thing which you write on a pen, isn't quite maybe the ideal method to accomplish.
I think a really important piece to mention about what IATA has implemented and why they went this direction is that governments push onto airlines a lot of requirements, and that they were looking ahead and saying, like, we do not want health data in our systems. We're fine checking the documents and then giving them back to the people and giving a green check mark. Like, we checked, they're good, and the check mark stays in the system, but not all the data itself, right? And so this this ability, and when the individual shows up at the border, they're the ones who share it with the government of the country that they're entering. IATA is like, keep us out of this, right? So it's how do you support the flow of the information, the bare minimum that you need, and also put the individual as the pivot point again for the more expansive information that other parties need along the journey.
Yeah, it's similar. Well, you look at PCI compliance for financial services and things like that. Same thing. Nobody wants the credit card. They want certainly to get the transaction and to get the funds flowing into their account, but they do not want all that information. And again, it's how do you tokenize this and how do you make sure that everything is secure without, having all that data shared, which isn't necessary.
In this case, NDCO has worked with CETA on implementing also a COVID record system. In this case, governments who do want the data, right? They have regulatory requirements that they need to hold very specific health data for a very specific period of time in order to let that traveler into their country. In the case of CETA, where NDCO supported was a trial with the government of Aruba. And in that case, the medical record was issued and held by the traveler, and they selectively disclose just the information that the government needs to hold for a very specific period of time, and they provide consent. As a result of that, if the traveler meets the requirements of Aruba, they are issued a happy traveler card, another verifiable credential. But here's what's special about that credential. That happy traveler card does not contain any information about the traveler in the sense of their medical status, the hotel they're staying at, their phone number. But in order to enter high-risk environments like casinos or nightclubs or restaurants, they get scanned their happy traveler card. So the casino has the knowledge that the government has approved this traveler to be on the island, that they met the health requirements, however they met them, and that they could enter their facility, and therefore they can increase the capacity of the number of people within this high-risk venue. And so that is a direction where CETA has been working directly with governments to exchange the information, much in the way that IATA has done with the verifiable credential.
And not have somebody out in the parking lot of the club out there producing these and selling them on.
But here's what's cool about this work is it's creating a seamless travel experience using verifiable credentials. And I think what's important for the audience is you hear about IATA travel pass, you hear about a happy pass, you hear about a medical record. Guess what? You can also use the same credentials into your solutions with the consent of the holder.
Right. Yeah, and that's the key. It's the traveler decides what they're going to use, which is the magical part of it. Maybe it's probably best to focus on some use cases, right? Before we've talked about some of them here. For those who want to get involved in this, for the Decentralized Identity Foundation, there is a hospitality and travel special interest group. And actually, to become a member, it's just bit.ly, bit.ly/, all lowercase, DIFHTSIG. So DIF, Hospitality and Travel Special Interest Group. Do that, you can join. The meetings are robust, and we've now developed four use cases, and we'll talk about some of them here. But it's very much leading edge work, and the industry can benefit massively from it. So one of the ones is there's been a lot of talk certainly about corporate travel and things like that. So one of the use cases is a verified hotel stay in kind of a corporate space and things like that. So an example would be if you need a corporate negotiated rate, well, the corporate, corporation or the TMC can work with it as well. Has something that says, yes, this employee is still employed by this company. So I won't say the car rental agency or the organization that I worked with 20 years ago, but their special code still works. And if I wanted to, I could use it, and I can get free I don't have to pay extra for one-way drop-offs, and my wife can drive for free, so there are all sorts of financial benefits for me to game the system. But this shuts all that down. So, and again, they're employed. It's not how much they're paid or their role or anything like that. It's just how they go. And then all of a sudden, it can tie back into expense reporting. So there are what other examples are there like that we can, I mean, the opportunities are somewhat unlimited, right? Is IATA working on any others, or are you guys focused just really on the COVID and that, or there are more things the airlines are?
No, COVID is definitely the short-term element.
Right.
Again, we have lots to recover in international travel, and we got to get that going. So there's a few airlines launching it, and the uptake is being positive. There'll be probably a big movement here in the U.S. In the coming months with Emirates. But again, let's see how it takes. But I think one of the elements there, what we can anticipate happening, as Heather was saying, is what the interaction will be like. So this thing of having to stand in line to show passports, to show visas or certifications or whatever, even when you get to the other side of the travel, then you get off the airport and then you have to stand in line to go through immigrations, that will eventually all disappear. We can imagine a world where, with the proper data being made available throughout the journey, the government at the departure point, the transiting point, and even in this nation will be able to vet you, and you can then, using the word, seamlessly go through the process. And if someone has an interest in you, they're going to tap on our shoulder and say, Heather, I want to talk to you, and take you to the side, but else you simply flow through the system and no one's going to be talking to you. So much higher convenience, reduced times, better level of services. I think this is what we anticipate will happen.
Commercial opportunities for airlines with NDC, things like that, duty-free shopping,
yes,
like this, streamline that whole process, tax recovery, all those different things that fall into place.
And I think it's important to know that governments are exploring using this technology for certain things. There is work going on to issue green cards in this verifiable credential format in the next calendar year. Because they're more secure than paper, right? Like they're digitally signed by the issuer, being the US government, and then they're given to the individual who is traveling to the US, and then they present them digitally to the border agents, right? Like, and potentially also, like, instead of having those documents inspected by the folks at the desk, that's preloaded up because it's digitally native, right? That's the thing that's different, right? Paper is not digitally native. It's not designed to be transmitted over the wires. This is. And I think one of the things to understand about the work is that it's ongoing and collaborative, right? So the work to develop the Good Health Pass interoperability blueprint was 200 folks from travel, technology, government folks being like, how do we get systems like IATA's deployed across a whole range of industries, not just for one thing with the airline travel, but how do we get it so that other folks are using it? And open standards are really key. I think one of the things you're seeing, and I'm sure you're experiencing this, is sort of siloed vendors saying, we can solve this. Well, yeah, but for like my one event. Or we're going to create a system where everybody's being tracked and sort of pinged by a central privacy-respecting system. Like, really? It's centralized. It's storing all the data, and it's telling you everywhere I go. And the cool thing about verifiable credentials, they don't phone home. That's a very important privacy quality of this technology that's really different, like what you were asking about at the beginning.
It truly supports the right to be forgotten and things like that, because there are a lot of transactions.
You still have to make them delete it, right? Like,
yes, that's true.
It doesn't necessarily. It means also that you can delete data, because when they show up again, they can just share it with you again, right? Like, you don't have to store as much of it.
Right. Yeah, it should streamline quite a...
And I think when you get to tactical use cases, this week CETA announced a successful pilot with pilot licensing credentials. And they're extending that to airport personnel credentials. So you could see a future quickly where you have airline employees with credentials. But here's what's interesting that's going on is the future is that employee, for instance, the pilot, being able to show proof of his or her employment to that airline's credit union to open an account remotely without ever having to go to the branch.
Right.
And so that's where we see the future and use cases when it comes to aviation and travel employees. When it comes to travelers and the consumer, we see the future of removing friction. And to get real tactical here, how many challenges do you have with bots and emails? How many emails do you have that are dead emails? How many bots do you think you're interacting with? And then how many username, passwords, resets does your company do for your customers every day, let alone your pain of having to, on your travel, log in, reset, log in, reset? Verifiable credentials removes the username and password. You issue a verified credential once you verify that that email is connected, and that's it. They just use the credential from their wallet to log in. And so imagine a way of traveling where you can go through your whole travel journey never having to log in or reset your password on your entire vacation.
Right.
That's the future that decentralized identity and verifiable credentials offers today. And the code that we talk about is actually open source, Hyperledger Indy, Aries, and Ursa. And there's also Linux Foundation Public Health has a project called Kaliya specifically on COVID credentials. All the technology we're talking about today, available, open source, ready to go as soon as you're ready to start coding.
Right.
And that's what's amazing about what's going on right now.
And it really is for the hotel industry, there's always been a struggle because there's been ownership, management companies, and brands, and how you facilitate these things and kind of get this information passing back and forth. It's been very complicated. This simplifies a lot. So even checking into the hotel, the same thing. Mm-hmm. You come in, you want to have internet access. You should be able to do that first, access the room key and things like that, be able to open your door. I'm sure Hilton's done a great job with their remote key, and people staying here at the Diplomat have probably used that. But when you come in and get on the internet, you should be able to do that. And why shouldn't you seamlessly be able to see your Netflix, if you have Netflix and Hulu and Disney, who knows, whatever litany of, why isn't that just all there on the screen with your account so you can do it and keep track of it, and you don't have to go log in or go through a bunch of gymnastics to get to your preferred list and find the point in the show where you left off before you went. It's all doable, and then the technology's there, and it's open source, which is a great thing. Some of the other use cases, I think flight disruptions and things like that are just, everybody suffers the pain of those. And yes, you're in the airport, all of a sudden you're on your phone, I've got to get another flight, and certainly a big part of TripIt's business was that, notifications of, hey, here are alternate flights and things like that. But these phones also have intelligent agents, which can work on your behalf and can start doing some very interesting things. So all of a sudden, change the flight. Well, the airline has to do something with that, and someone with reciprocity in terms of the fares. If your bag misconnects, where does it need to go?
Well, that's a great point. We've talked about verifiable credentials from the standpoint of humans holding verifiable credentials. Your bag can hold its own verifiable credentials. Verifiable credentials, I think the power that we haven't fully tapped into is around IoT. Yep. Every device, chair, receipt, document can have its own decentralized identifier, its own set of verifiable credentials. It could even have its own digital wallet. Right. And so there is immense future here with IoT verifiable credentials.
So a good example, corporations who may not reimburse for alcohol or something like that. Not that anyone would charge alcohol onto their room bill or anything like that. But that's great. You could get full reporting, detail of that from whatever, a micro's point of sale system into whatever, property management system, report on a credential that then goes and loops back through the expense reporting process with relatively little friction, or certainly much less friction than the pain that everyone goes through with expense reporting right now on business trips, right? Because it's just crazy. Mm-hmm. So there are all these things that can go. You mentioned getting your bag delivered, especially. I mean, pre-COVID, I was traveling around Italy because the daughter who was sneaking into the bars with a fake ID, was studying over there. But we went to several places, and the bag didn't connect. Alitalia, hey, you got to expect certain things to be consistent. So didn't get the bag, but hey, we were in Milan for it, and then all of a sudden, we're somewhere else, and it got to us, which was great. But this again streamlines all of that. The hotel, we're arriving late, or I have a 5-day reservation. I'm not arriving today for day 1. A lot of times that cancels your whole thing. How does that work out? Huge things that are obstacles today just become a lot simpler. What other compelling use cases can you guys think of? Just have a few minutes, or if there are any questions, we'd be happy to have
Well,
those.
I was going to say one of the things that you're talking about is like another piece of the standards landscape that we've been developing, which is decentralized identifier communication, right? So imagine creating a secure channel between you and your customers that's potentially always open, and that's how you solve these problems of this coordination, right? Like you're not emailing the customer or begging them for their phone number so you can text them. You're using Didcom into their wallet to potentially communicate and connect on a cryptographically secure channel, and we don't have that today. Right? So it's really a breakthrough in the infrastructure level. So part of why we're not like spouting out use cases, there's so many, and we've built the Lego bricks of this infrastructure, and now it's up to industries like yours to pick them up and build solutions.
Or the plumbers.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's really exciting to have that connection and that capability, because everybody's talking about how can they interact with their customer on a peer-to-peer level, right? And that's what this facilitates. And that's not that, oh my gosh, Chris Silcock at Hilton has no need for OTAs or anything. No, he'll still be working the OTAs, and the OTAs will have their relationships with their customer, or Steve, well, I guess for the next month or so with TripAdvisor and TripAdvisor Plus subscribers. But then all of a sudden you can start trading information back and forth with partners and not necessarily be giving a ton of information that's not appropriate, or if you're a United 10K member or something.
Right, and the protocol Kaliya talks about is Didcom, and it's actually with the Decentralized Identity Foundation that you just suggested. People join the special interest group. Didcom enables that peer-to-peer connection, and what I am really excited about, not only continuing the work with CETA and verifiable credentials in travel, is bringing that to the payment rails. And so I do work with a company by the name of Liquid Avatar Technologies out of Toronto, and Dynamics, the payment rails, and we're putting verifiable credentials into the payment rails for age verification in Ontario convenience stores. That's exciting for Ontario convenience stores, not having to worry about having the paper card in order to purchase age-restricted products. But what it has done is taken Didcom, put it into the payment rails so people can share verifiable credentials at the POS terminal. And one thing is pretty much a lot of places have a POS terminal. So that opens up the infrastructure for the entire travel industry to use verifiable credentials at a point of sale. What use cases does that open up?
Oh, yeah. And again, I do a lot of work in the hospitality space, but things like, the example I like to use, you have a VIP, maybe a VIP who's at this conference. They get upgraded, they're in a suite, this is fantastic, they're traveling with their spouse, and what do they get? This beautiful fruit basket to welcome them. Only problem is one spouse has a nut allergy, the other one has a melon sensitivity, and it's like, get the poison out of our room, right? So all of a sudden you can start sharing certain, and you don't have to say who has the nut allergy or what's wrong or anything like that, but all of a sudden you make that aware, and if you can start sharing that seamlessly with restaurants, with all of that, all of a sudden, a lot of the complexity of food service just gets simplified, which obviously helps margins, profitability, the whole thing.
Yeah. Before we close, I wanted to extend an invitation to this audience to participate in a travel summit around COVID health credentials that we're hosting virtually at Linux Foundation Public Health. It's on December 1st and 2nd, depending on your time zone. And all the information's up on my blog, which is identitywoman.net, in the blog section, or you can just look at my Twitter handle, and I've linked to it. So we'd love to have more participation from folks in the industry helping us solve all these COVID challenges at the COVID Credentials Initiative.
And 10 or 15 years from now or whenever we're talking to kids or grandkids or something like that, and they're going, you used to use paper? What the heck were you thinking? This is the future. I really think this is going to be a tremendous step change for not just the industry, but for everyone in their everyday lives, especially when you start, we didn't even talk about the metaverse and things like that. This is going to become very, very important stuff. So again, thank you very much for your attention, and thanks very much, Heather, Filipe, and
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kaliya. Thanks very much for the time.